This is Paul Nobles from Eat to Perform. I am sitting here with April Blackford. April, if you want to say hi to everybody.
Hi, everyone.
So the topic that we're going to get into today was sort of like this meme that was sort of funny about how manatees eat lettuce all day, swim nonstop, and yet still carry a fair amount of fat. You know what's interesting about manatees is that they seem a lot bigger than they actually are in real life. Have you ever seen a manatee in real life?
I have.
You have not?
I have, yes. I just saw one in the Florida Keys last year.
Yeah, but they're not as big. Like I thought of, like they were whale size. You know?
I never thought they were that big. Maybe like a walrus or something, but
Yeah, but they're not even. I mean, I think walruses are bigger than them.
they
You
are.
know. But yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about why I think people view stored bodily fat wrongly, and how if they change their mind to it a little bit, that it would be helpful and ultimately help them reach their goals. So one of the things that we've been doing is starting the podcast off with some kind of weird story from Paul's past, and I had a lot of great stories that I was gonna bring up, and for some reason I didn't write them down. But April did remind me that I was gonna tell you guys about the time that my wife and I drove down to New Orleans. This was probably within 6 months of us being together. And you know what? It really wasn't actually, now that I think about it. It was probably 4 years into it. I was selling cars at the time. And the dealership gave me a car to take down to Louisiana. And I drove the good majority of the time. It's like 24 hours to get to Louisiana. And so, we went through St. Louis at the time. And this is why last time I was going to tell the story, I couldn't, because I remember there was a lot more layers to the story. But as we were coming through St. Louis, and I'm maybe 23, 24 years old at this time, maybe 25. But we we get through St. Louis, and I'm tired, and so I decide that I'm going to rest my eyes a little bit. And so my wife, well, she wasn't my wife at the time, but my now wife starts driving, and I fall asleep relatively quickly, probably 30 to 45 minutes. And then my wife starts hitting me. She goes, "We're losing power," you know, and I'm startled, wondering what the heck's going on. The car is gradually turn into a crawl. She'd been driving, like I said, for 45 minutes to an hour, and um, she goes, "What do you think is happening?" And like I look at the gas gauge, and I go, "I think we're out of gas." um, and at the time, we're in the middle of Missouri, and all you can think is like the movie Deliverance. Right? You're just going, I mean, you have to imagine the scenario. First of all, I have to get out of the car and go find gas. I have to leave my girlfriend, eventual wife, in the car by herself. And it was just a scary prospect. So I started hitchhiking, to get to the nearest gas station. And this guy pulls over like almost immediately. And I was like, "Oh, this is a godsend. This is awesome." And the guy, he was just coming back from a Garth Brooks concert. And he's like, "Do you like Garth Brooks?" I was like, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of Garth Brooks, you know. And at the whole time, I think I only know the Achy Breaky song. That's it, you know. That was like a big deal.
I don't think Garth Brooks sang that one. I think that was Billy Ray Cyrus.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't even know anything about Garth Brooks. Well, what's the big song by Garth Brooks?
um, Gosh, I can't remember it. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, but he's talking to me and he's naming all these country artists, and I mean, it's not like I'm against country music, but I'm not, you know, I certainly wasn't a huge fan at that time, but I'm like, I at least know enough to play along, and I also know enough that, you know, I don't want this guy chopping me up into little pieces, and so I just, you know, try to play nice, and he was a perfect guy. Delivered me to the place. I ended up getting gas, um, and then, you know, we ended up heading back to Louisiana. But it was just sort of funny, the whole, you know, we're losing power. Why do you think it is? Well, it could be the gas situation, you know. And what's funny, like even to this day, she will hold up the fact that I didn't, you know.
I was actually just thinking, you can let Vicky know when you told the story that I was just thinking that if you handed over the car and you had only been asleep for 45 minutes, then the gas light been close to being on already.
Yeah,
So
but I was sleepy at the time, April. I mean, I can't even believe that you would take her side on this
I'm
one.
not taking her side, but I actually thought that when you started telling the story. You were only asleep 40 minutes, and all of a sudden it starts coasting, and she's like, oh crap, what's happening? So I do think that.
So scary. Okay, so I got another story really quickly. This one's a little quicker. It's kind of similar, where this was with my dad, and we were going to. And April knows my dad. We're both LSU football fans, and we were going to a LSU football game. And I said, "Are we going to drive?" And he said, "No." You know, Fran, who was his girlfriend at the time, was going to drop us off because her and her daughter were going to do something in Baton Rouge. I can't remember. And I thought to myself, this is the craziest thing, that we're going to try and hook up with people after the football game, because the atmosphere is just crazy. And once again, you know, I'm sitting there, you know, if you don't know my dad, what, you know, and then we've had a few stories about my dad. Most of the stories will, you know, there's a lot of stories about my dad because my dad's kind of a character. But the thing about my dad, you know, is that I'm the dad in the relationship. You know, he is like the child, and you know, I often have to try and protect him. And so we're sitting here, you know, it was Florida against LSU. Florida killed LSU. It was a miserable game. It was a miserable time. Nobody's happy. We're now trying to hitchhike yet again, right? And literally every single LSU fan is driving by us. The only people that decided to pick us up were Florida fans, which was like the worst, you know, insult there could be, right? So we get in the car, and I have really nice clothes on. And we jump in the back of this truck. It's actually a truck, I'm sorry. So we jump in the back of this truck, which has like 4 radiators in the back of the truck, which I'm fairly sure were in the truck at some point, but aren't in the truck now. Then there's a tire, and in the middle of the tire is about 700 shrimp heads with flies everywhere, right? And you have to sort of imagine it, you know. And I remember actually at the time, you know, this was a long time ago, so I'll show you exactly how long, because I had on a pair of Jabot jeans and a white polo, and I'm sitting in the back of an oily truck, and I'm looking at my dad going, "I am done with you." I am so done with you, man. You put me through a lot of shit, but we're sitting in the back of these two guys from Florida, and bad things are gonna happen to us. So my dad knows Baton Rouge really well, and these guys take a left where they're supposed to take a right. And now we start to freak out that things are going to go really bad, and we start banging on the back of the truck, and we jump out. We ended up magically coming up to, the place where we were supposed to meet Fran, and it just happened to work out. It was like a total miracle. So we're driving back to New Orleans, right? I mean, the people that basically were going the wrong way could have had bad intentions for us. We just panicked and jumped out of their truck. We're driving down to New Orleans. This is probably 45 minutes later, and we were telling them, hey, look, you're going the wrong way. That's why we're jumping out of your truck. And so we see them. They pull up like right next to us, and we had eaten, we had taken our time. And now here it is, 45 minutes to an hour later, and they pull up next to us, and we roll down the window. They roll down and see, and we go, hey, we told you guys you were going the wrong way. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. So yeah, it was an experience. But I tried to explain to my dad that I had like on really nice clothes, and like those clothes got destroyed in this process. But yeah, the shrimp head story that just bringing that up kind of pisses me off a little bit. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about today, like I said, we talk about this a lot. When you're an Eat to Perform member, you have the ability to be on these webinars with us. But it's really kind of more than that, because a lot of the times, in fact, I don't even think that, I was just having a discussion with Caitlin and Jordy, and they basically kind of run the infrastructure of the forum. And one of the things that I don't think that Eat to Perform members take near as much advantage of are the fundamentals classes. And a lot of people are signing up to fundamentals classes and not showing up for them. And so we're going to try and open up a few more spots so we can accommodate more people, because what's happening is that all those people are taking the spots of people that would actually want to use the information. But what's interesting about it is that, it's really, a lot of times people will be in the forums and they will say, I'm confused, or, you're trying to get, new information, but they're not using these classes. And that's what those classes are designed to be. And the classes are similar to what we're doing here. Like if you're watching this on YouTube, we would basically have like 6 people and coaches involved, and we would all be talking. Some people, like to have a little bit more classes than that. And we have kind of quick start. What's nice about the quick start, if you're listening to the podcasts, recently we've been doing a lot more 30-minute podcasts. One of the more recent podcasts that I did was Life After Dieting. That was very good. And I think if you're looking for something to listen to that's a little bit more of a theme, similar to what we're about to do, that would be a good thing. But basically, you have kind of your basic membership. You have your quick start for kind of people that need a little bit more hand-holding. And, Catherine Adams is doing a phenomenal job at that within the forums. And then we have a number of other people that sort of help on the other side of that. Then we have the group coaching, which is basically run by April. And I'm one of the coaches. Dr. Brad Dieter's one of the coaches. A lot of times Mike Nelson will be one of the people. Mike is the one that wrote our manual for fat loss, and was kind of my co-author for the WAVE method. And so, it's just kind of various levels. I think a lot, when you look at, what's about 125,000 people at this point, a lot of people have gotten lean just using the forums, which is awesome. And then if they could use the fundamentals, that would really help them. But then there's some people that just need a little bit more help, and that's what those other two things are for. So you can now hear my dog. It's so frustrating to me that we have to relearn this one over and over again. But my dog, I might have you take over for a second so I can try and get her settled in. Can you just take over for just a second and talk about?
I'll talk about fundamentals.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do the fundamentals on Tuesdays at noon Eastern Standard Time, and we always have a party. So y'all should come and join my party. And we talk about everything from endurance sports to loading carbs for your workouts to what kind of protein can I eat here, there, just great ideas, just lots of different things. So I was telling them that my fundamentals classes have actually turned into parties. Everybody has an awesome time. They have fun. See, your dog just wanted some love. That's all she wanted.
How many people are showing? This is Kira, by the way. Kira is somewhat famous at this point, because of the forums and Fur Baby Fridays. But yeah, she normally expects people to be at home. She's kind of sniffing me. But I'm going to put her down here. Okay, you stay here.
Paul likes showing his sensitive side.
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about was stored body fat, because I think that what happens for people is they sort of focus on kind of the specifics of their physique and how they would like their physique to change, and don't really think of the basic mechanism of why your body stores fat in the first place. And I think that if you think of it that way, because sort of the meme that people were putting in, and I know I talked about it, roughly 20 minutes ago at this point, of, a manatee, eats weeds all day, swims and still has a fair amount of fat to use, which is funny. No doubt that is funny. But the manatee holds on to the fat as a manner of protection. And so when you look at all kinds of animals in all kinds of environments, you'll see, obviously, in Alaska, animals are kind of conditioned one way, and then, a cheetah, doesn't need near as much protection. And so when we think about what stored body fat is doing, it's really trying to protect you in a time of deprivation. Well, we don't have a whole lot of deprivation, right? Well, these days, you can, eat a lot of convenient foods. I would argue that the biggest problem that we have right now is not that we are eating too much. I would argue that we have not adjusted to the conditions that basically our bodies got used to for a long time, and really, if you look at it, it's only been relatively recent where, we're, insurance agents rather than lumberjacks, right? And I think it's sort of interesting that, there's lots of foods that are demonized and stuff like that. But it wasn't too long ago where, like, eggs, bacon, and hash browns, that's what everybody had for breakfast every single morning, and then, cornflakes came in and, things of this nature. But when you look at, why your body is holding on to excess body fat, it really does come down to the amount of lean muscle that you have on your frame. And are you working in a way that is kind of causing enough, adaptation? Like when you look at the manatee, obviously manatees evolved over time, kind of depending on, your views on evolution. But, in my view, the manatee evolved into being a manatee. He wasn't just placed on the earth. And the manatee then adapted to its environment, so as a matter of protection. And so when we look at what we can do to positively affect, our, stored body fat, you would really kind of point to not under eating, right? I mean, because the adaptation that your body needs to thrive is going to require some level of food, and even at times excess food, right? I think we got into an interesting discussion the other day where someone was talking, and we were talking about Rich Froning, and a lot of times when you bring up Rich Froning, people will often say, well, yeah, but I don't work out as much as Rich Froning, so therefore, it's a bad comparison. I would argue that, I think, and by the way, she was making a great point, and I remember it very well, because what she was saying is as long as you can find calorie balance, you can find a good compromise between the way that you eat and what you do, which is totally true. But my argument, will be till the day I die, is that is limiting. That's a limiting idea. And if you're continuously trying to find a way to get better as a thriving human being, the best way to do that is with some level of food, right? And then your body would obviously adapt to whatever. What we really want is more muscle, less fat. You can't do that without some level of adaptation, and you can't do that without an adequate amount of energy, right? And so that's where I think that people they look at fat and they go, I don't want this on my body, but they're not looking at it from the standpoint of how it would really go away, right? And what would be the determining factors there? Do you have any thoughts? Because
Oh, I have a ton of thoughts. Yeah, so many different, areas to touch on, but exactly what you were just saying in regards to, they look at their bodies and they just see the fat. And I think a lot of times it's just black and white for them. All they see is fat. And in their minds, the only way to reduce that is to diet, rather than looking at it the opposite direction. Like for example, there's a lady that I'm working with in the coaching program, very, very healthy height to weight ratio, 130 some pounds, 5'6", 5'7". But her primary goal is to lose body fat, and, tried to explain that if you lose weight, you're going to be at an unhealthy weight for your height, so we need to look in the direction of improving your performance and adding lean tissue, because that's going to get you to where you need to go, rather than just constantly thinking about the diet, the deficit, and also realizing that in some cases it's okay to keep your weight somewhat stabilized, somewhat within a couple of pounds, as long as your performance is increasing, you're getting better at what you're doing, and you're eating more food. That's actually a great indicator.
Well, and the problem that you run into when you're already relatively lean, like the stats that you described, that would be a person that's already relatively lean. The issue that you have there is that you get diminishing returns, right? So let's say that that's a female, and let's say that she was 22%. You could essentially do the math and go, well, I wonder how she could get to 18%. Well, what is 130 times 4, right? So you're roughly 5.2 pounds. So if she loses 5.2 pounds, she'll be down body fat. No, because at that point, your body is actually viewing your lean mass as a source of energy. And so if you're not doing some level of going up, I would argue the good majority of the time, and it sounds like someone that's obviously been very conscious of their weight for a while, they probably haven't really explored the top end. And if you don't explore the top end, essentially you're just holding back your metabolic rate, and ultimately you're going to store more body fat as a result. And unfortunately, my dog is going crazy here. So why don't you go further on that, April?
As an example, in regards to exploring the top end, over the past 2 years, I have purposely tried to gain weight very, very slowly to add muscle. And as I would increase my calories, my weight would stabilize every couple of months on higher calories. And then I would hang out there for a couple months and increase calories again and increase calories again. So pushing the upper limits, I think, is absolutely necessary, because a lot of people think that you just increase your calories and then you hang out there for the rest of your life, or you hang out there for the next 6 months and then you focus on cutting body fat. I actually brought up the topic how I had actually increased my calories, and then every couple of months, every 3 months or so, I would up them again and continue to increase them, purposely to gain. But the funny thing about it is every time I would actually make an increase, the scale would drop. The scale would drop every single time, and then I would kind of push a little bit more. But I do think that at some point you can basically have the recomposition, kind of somewhat the gradually awesome approach for some, depending upon their recovery days. But depending on, what the person's goals are, I think that, as long as you are gradually moving upward, I do think that, at some point we should be okay with seeing the scale increase a little bit.
Well, okay. So yeah, I think you're kind of hitting on a couple points that is sort of like the fear points that people have, right? Where, if you're upping your calories, your weight is definitely, logically going to go up, right? In your case, what happened was it allowed for more work capacity, it allowed for better metabolic rate, and ultimately, you did.
I want to add, though, that I had already reverse dieted. So I had reversed into my so-called maintenance level, and weight was stable from there. And then I continue to push it up more.
Right. But from a scientific standpoint, ultimately what you did, because I think the part I'm going to try and hammer on is that we see a lot of people that are scared to death about increasing calories, increasing carbs, whatever. But they don't really focus on the movement part, or they don't really focus on the resistance training part, and I like cardio. I like being able to get in enough work, and cardio allows for more work. But the problem that, even in the case of CrossFit, is that the level of work, can kind of mess with like the resistance part. And so from my standpoint, you really want to have almost, as much, if not maybe even a little bit more. Like if your go-to thing is running, you may have exhausted your abilities to see results by more running. There's only so much you can do. Like people say, well, eventually you'll out-eat your metabolism. Well, you could, right? But have you really tried? Have you really tried to add in enough work? Because I'll tell you, I have tried, and it is sort of interesting when you do that, because when like once again watching the Rich Froning thing. I mean, this dude's like jamming on pizza and Snickers and all this various food, and people don't realize that like for you to have that level of output to draw from bodily fat when you're at an energy deficit is not really an option. Your body's just doesn't work that way. It needs relatively quick energy. But it's sort of funny. People are like, well, Rich Froning doesn't eat throughout the day. Well, he doesn't necessarily eat throughout the day because he just had half a bag of Snickers, some Twizzlers and some pizza, So and the other thing about Rich Froning that I think is really interesting is that he does his own programming. And, I know that he works with various coaches and stuff like this, but in general, he's sort of kind of the master of what he designs. And I think too many people try to divorce themselves. Just tell me what to do, which is awesome, right? That can be helpful when you're first starting off. But the problem is that if you just resort to that all the time, there's sort of this divorce from what it really takes to understand how your body works. And your body's not storing fat because, it doesn't like you. It's storing fat to protect you in a time of deprivation, right? And if you can show your body from an evolutionary standpoint that you're willing to thrive, right? That you need it. I mean, we've been doing like this project called the Save Our Kids Project, and we're talking to people about, why we've allowed ourselves to watch our children as they're going to martial arts, or watch our children as they're on soccer, and you'll see all the parents sort of lined up, and in chairs, which is fine. I don't have any judgment on that, but they often are unattended as it relates to their own health journey. And so it doesn't set a great role model for them for the future, right? For the children for the future. I really apologize. I don't even think that this podcast is going to be usable because I'm so distracted by my dog.
She's really not loud. It's not a distraction. It is to you, but it's not to us.
It's just very difficult for me to concentrate, because of it. But either way,
hey, did you finish all your push-ups?
No. I'm
gonna get on that because my arms are gonna be broken tomorrow. Because I did all 300 during my workout. That was horrible.
Wow.
It was horrible.
Yeah, well, that would be horrible. I have 110 left. I'm at 390.
Oh, that's not too bad. I set my goals a little bit lower at the 300, but I added all the different variations, and then I was regretting that afterwards. So,
I'm not saying this for any reason, but I'm doing them strict, and so that has that adds like a different element to it. And just kind of doing the tens has sort of helped that. But, at 400, you're still kind of feeling it, and you do need some time to recover. So it's going to be interesting to see how I'm able to get in the next 110 before bedtime. But,
just go
I remember posting this video of one of our members' dads, and he's 56 years old, and he could pull himself up from the ground all the way, his torso above his head. And what I think happens for a lot of us. What now?
You can do what?
He basically he can do a pull up and then raise his waist up, It's not super hard to do, but for a 56-year-old guy, he's pretty capable,
So he does a pull up and then curls his torso up, like where his legs are up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not like the most amazing thing you'll ever see, but then you go, well, he's like a 56-year-old dude, so it's pretty amazing. But what happens is we've lost this whole aspect of thriving, and we're so focused on being less than that it just doesn't even make physiological sense, right? You're essentially in a race to the end of your life of being capable, right? And I can't tell you how many people that I know, including myself, obviously in my 30s, right? In my 30s, you know, I had just sort of abandoned myself almost, like nonsensically, right? And, obviously around age 39, I was able to recapture that and then kind of thrive. But a lot of people will dig the hole so deep that they don't really allow themselves to get to that thriving point. So now all of a sudden you go, well, okay, well I'll just eat less and I won't do very much, or I'll just eat less and do a bunch of cardio. Well, I did the whole bunch of cardio thing, and ultimately I sort of got stuck at about 21%. So at some point, your body just wants you to build muscle, right? Your body just wants you to be more capable, and I just think that if you're going to get to a point where you're trying to reach your physique goals by eating less all the time, you're really kind of playing with a lot of elements that are the opposite of the way that your body wants to work. And that's why when you look at the best athletes, even the best athletes at higher ages, they're physically capable. They're not just runners, right? They have some level of resistance training. I mean, they like when I posted the video of that guy, I said the whole point of being a lion on a savannah isn't so much that you need to be the biggest, baddest lion on the savannah. You just need to be capable enough where the other lions don't try and take your stuff, right? And I feel like for myself, okay, I didn't feel like I could have protected my family. I can now, I feel like, there's some level of capable there, and I am appealing to people and their basic nature. I'm basically saying to guys, look, there's a reason like Viagra commercials are all over television, just gonna tell you, when you work with weights, when you have a high functioning heart, those problems don't exist. The reason why a lot of those issues exist is because we've allowed ourselves to be incapable over time, and so we're losing, that battle. I mean, obviously there's extremes to that, but I mean, the big majority of people that are using those products are in their 40s, right? So I think that we've sort of lost our way a little bit, and that's sort of what the challenge is. I don't know how we got into Viagra talk.
I started to say I have no comment about the Viagra.
You really don't?
No, I don't. No one in my household needs Viagra, so I don't know what you're talking about. And I will say, better not ever need it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal. Let's see. Jenna was saying, I wonder if anyone else is having a hard time hearing you. Microphone is kind of breaking up. Yeah, I don't know. We had a little audio issue early on, but I hope that sort of got resolved. Yeah, I don't know. It was sort of distracting with my dog and stuff, but I think the thing with stored bodily fat is that a lot of people land in the same spot over and over again. Um, and one of the reasons why they do is because they don't focus on the capable side. And they have like these preconceived notions. I thought it was interesting, like when Taylor talked about his weight and how, um, he came in at Eat to Perform at 160 pounds, and that now he weighs, close to 200, but he's at like 10% body fat. You know, like that was a person that was repressing their physical capabilities unnecessarily. And I think that's a little tougher for women, and it's probably a little tougher for aging women, because they don't see themselves as athletes. They don't see themselves as people that can pursue being capable. But the problem that you run into in that scenario is that you're essentially just giving up, because if you're just looking at less, less, less at that point, you really get to this point of kind of reaching mortality,
I like I like to look at it as basically the analogy of you have the Jeep that you're running through the woods and it's kind of muddy and slippery, and you kind of start slipping around when you're going down in the deficit and you're going down in the diminishing returns. But eventually the Jeep is going to get bogged down in the mud and you're going to be stuck, and you're just going to sit there and your wheels are going to keep spinning and spinning and spinning until you can get out, and like what you were saying before, your body wants to thrive, wants to have periods of time that it thrives, and you can't constantly be in, that negative state. You can't constantly be, not eating an adequate amount, or, over exercising, or whatever the situation is. I was talking.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I was actually chatting with someone, on Saturday, and I was explaining to her that, it even, and I know you've been there, Paul, many years ago, but it took me many, many years to even understand, and I can relate as a female, that unfortunately society teaches us that, 1,500 calories is a lot of food and whatever. And back in my days that I had dieted within 4 months, lost 40 some pounds, but that was eating 1,800 calories. I ate 1,800 calories during that time. I did not work out. I didn't walk. I had a very sedentary job, sitting at a desk. I did nothing. But then once I lost the weight, I saw, my skin looked a little flabby here. I needed to do something. And I kind of have an obsessive compulsive personality. So I was like, oh, I got to start working out. As soon as I added in the exercise, as soon as I added in some weights at home and things like that, pull-ups, chin-ups, some cardio, I immediately gained 15 pounds in 2 months, immediately. And I was still eating the 1,800 calories. I had not changed my diet. And of course I couldn't understand, and thought, well, clearly I must be eating a surplus. I need to drop it more. I need to drop it more. And then that was just the yo-yo cycle of, I basically spent a year and a half, 2 years of spinning my tires in the mud in the woods, with no way to get out, Yeah,
and I mean, nobody's making an argument that you should just try to eat an infinite amount of calories and do an infinite amount of things, right? But what we are making an argument for is that, if you're not trying to thrive, your body's going to adapt to being underfed, and it's not going to hold on to lean mass long term. And are we talking about short periods of time? No. I mean, sort of the basis for Eat to Perform is that you can have periods where you can go a little bit lower, but the majority of the time you're eating at an adequate amount for what you do, and adjusting and adapting. And when we say adapting, your body's going to adapt to one way or the other. It's going to adapt to thriving and being more capable, and kind of focusing on more and more and more, or it's going to adapt to less, less, less. And if it adapts to more and more and more, you are going to have some level of lean mass and you're going to have some level of fat. I think what's interesting about whether it's down or up is that people want it to be sort of like this linear thing. Like I was talking about earlier, with the 130-pound lady, you could do the math and you could go, whoa, 5.2 pounds. It never, I'm not going to say never. Sometimes it works out that way, but it almost never does, And there's a lot of people that, as an example, could put on 7 pounds of fat, right? But they're more capable. They're more of a human being. They can hold their granddaughters. You know what I'm saying? Like all these different things that really should be the end focus. And it doesn't mean that you wouldn't take a period where you would eat at a deficit. But if you're already eating at a deficit, right, and you start going lower, the formula gets a lot harder. But if you're eating at an adequate amount of food for what you do, the good majority of people have no idea how much their food they're eating on a daily basis. Like, not at all, and they always try to just dramatically undereat without ever really knowing how much they eat. We're like the first people to introduce the fact that you should have a healthy baseline, and people sort of fight us on that one because they want to end a life of pain quickly. And I would argue, if you have a whole life of pain, wouldn't some level of understanding of what that really is all about, rather than trying to just solve it immediately, wouldn't that be better, right? And a lot of people would say, no, it's not better. I'm going to, do my extreme, and, I don't care how capable I am, and, there you go. But I think the good majority of people do, and we're able to kind of reach those people. And a lot of times people will look back at that and go, I don't know why I was on that, train for so long, but it feels nice to be on this new train,
I think you and I have said it many, many times. I wish I could have the first 2 years that I really got into training back. Like, I'd be uberly jacked, if I had that time back, But unfortunately, you work with what you have and move on from there.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about what people will tend to believe is they will look at the science of something and they will, I'm sorry, I'm going to go ahead and just shut this down, because I'm very frustrated with some level of something. So I appreciate everybody being here. I'm just gonna say one last thing. This probably won't even see the air, but what really ticks me off is the level of care that we provide people, and the good majority of people appreciate that care. But then there's some people that disrespect the amount of effort that we put in and the amount of knowledge that we seek on a daily basis. And the problem that you run into when you're only looking for a specific result at all times is that you don't always get exactly what you want. And so you might be thinking to yourself, well, those people don't know what they're talking about because you didn't get your magic potion. I would argue that that's the only way you really solve anything. But I don't think we're ever going to really have a meaningful discussion with somebody about that, if their sole focus is based in ego and based on disappointment, on a life, where thriving as a human being, hasn't been a priority. And so I appreciate everybody listening. And I guess I'm just a little frustrated by some of that. This wasn't the best podcast we ever did. And there you go. I appreciate everybody being here, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Good night, everyone.